So you guys can hear that even though most of the calls these bats make are too high frequency for us to hear, they do make noises you can hear when you have them in your hand. So most of their sounds are too high, but some of them are not. This is a tricolored bat, or its old name was Eastern pipistrelle, but it's changed recently and its name is now Perry. The first time I saw impacts from white nose syndrome, I guess I was really prepared to see it because I had heard so much about it. I'd seen video, I had seen pictures, and I thought it wouldn't impact me any more than I already felt. But when I saw it on bats, I saw dead bats, and just to see the fungus growing over the face of an animal that's trying to survive the winter, it's devastating. We are at the Nature Conservancy's property. It's Black's Bluff Reserve, just south of Rome. There's a cave at the site, Osborne Cave, behind me that we're going to go into. We've been in it last year. There's about 200 tricolored bats. We're coming back year after year to monitor the numbers, make sure that the numbers are staying relatively consistent, and also check for signs of white nose syndrome. When we go into a cave, whether or not we think it's going to be impacted by white nose syndrome anytime soon, our main goal is to count the bats. We haven't necessarily had a good count of bats that were considered common in our caves before white nose syndrome. So we just want to get a count of the overall number of bats, so as we go in year after year, if those environments are impacted by white nose syndrome, we can document that decline in those sites if there is a decline. White nose syndrome is a disease that impacts hibernating bats in the United States. It's found in the eastern United States. It was first noticed in 2006. It's caused by a fungus called Geomyces destructans, which grows on the bats when they're hibernating and causes them to wake up too often and burn their fat reserves that they've stored for the winter. It causes them to wake up during hibernation and fly out of the cave looking for food, or they are too sick and die in the cave. When they fly out, it's the winter and there's no insects, which is what all of these hibernating bats eat, so they die on the landscape or in the cave. It's estimated that it has killed about 5.5 to 6.5 million bats so far in the United States. So when white nose syndrome is present on the bat, you will see white fungus growing on the nose. It was first seen, that's where it gets its name, on the muzzle of the bats, as well as on other skin membranes, including the wing and tail. On the wing, it can sometimes make that tissue necrotic, which means it will get big holes missing. It'll kind of eat away the skin on the wing membrane, and you'll see patches of fungus as well as the parts of the skin missing on the bat when they're really heavily impacted by white nose syndrome. It was discovered in a cave in New York in 2006 because someone reported that there were bats flying around in the wintertime. They were flying around people's houses, crashing into snowbanks and dying. Biologists went into a cave and saw bats with white fungus on their nose and submitted them for testing. Since 2006, it spread to about 20 states so far this year. That number will probably go up before the end of this year. In the sites where white nose syndrome has already moved through, usually after the first year or two of infection, over 90% of the bats die, sometimes near 100%. If it continues to spread beyond cold caves in the United States and Canada, it could spread into populations that are pollinating bats, have other functions besides the insect-eating cave bats. We don't expect that will happen. We don't expect white nose syndrome to spread to the coast of Georgia, for instance, where bats don't have to hibernate because they're active year-round in the warmer temperatures. But we're really not sure at this point. It could potentially change or mutate and impact all bats.
The idea that our bat houses here are in an open air environment and it's not really reproductive of a cave situation where there's a lot of humidity and darkness. This is an open air situation. The hope would be that the fungus that causes white nose syndrome would not occur in that type of a microclimate. I'm the coordinator for environmental health and safety pest management. We are primarily the in-house pest control service for the campus facilities. Whenever bats get in buildings that create a nuisance, we usually coordinate exclusion projects and are just sort of the overseers of the bat house projects. And one of the requisites is food. The other requisite is shelter. The other is fresh water. And the one thing that seems to be in the shortest supply is the shelter. So since there's plenty of fresh water and plenty of insects around, the idea is to give bats a place to live undisturbed and not to be a nuisance around people. Well, this is the bat house. It was the original structure. It's built in March of 1991, and it was built to serve as the alternative habitat for the colony of bats that was excluded from the track stadium. The house sat vacant for approximately 4 years until a colony started getting established, and then grew over time, and then became a maternity colony, and the numbers have grown ever since 1995. And then let's see, probably in 2010 the bat barn was built. It was basically to accommodate the ever increasing colony size of the bats, and it's been incorporated some additional improvements over the house, in that there's more surface area and more volume underneath the roof that allows for more fins to be installed, which has a higher capacity for bats to live in. We could probably house 750,000 to 1 million bats. Right now we're estimating our population at around 400,000. It's the world's largest occupied bat house.
The bats in the house in Florida, it never stays cold for long enough that bats need to really hibernate. So we don't anticipate, even if they would pick up spores on those bats from other bats maybe that were impacted by white nose syndrome, they wouldn't likely move those spores into a place where the fungus could grow, because that fungus needs a constant cold temperature to reproduce.
And then every evening, during the season, there are probably anywhere from 50 to 100 people that watch bats fly out from the house at night. So probably, one of the more bat-friendly neighborhoods or communities as a result of the Bat House project here.
Bats are a very important part of the ecosystem. In these cave environments, they provide the nutrient input from their guano. They also serve as a food source for other animals. And for us, all of our bats eat insects.
Bats are the world's largest predator of night-flying insects. A lot of other insects that are pests on crops and trees and shrubs that fly at night are eaten and helped controlled by bats.
That's an important function that they serve, both for just insect control in general and also pest control for crops.
So anytime we can encourage natural pest control, obviously, that's what we want to do.
If a bat can get through the winter with white nose syndrome and get out of the cave, they can groom the fungus off. Their skin, to a point, can repair and heal. And if they can reproduce in the summertime, those individuals might have a chance to live. So we need to give them a good environment outside of the cave, and to continue to learn as much about them as we can and protect them as much as possible.